even like personal exercise. At first, like I had to make that a priority for the summer. I noticed my body was not at the strength and at the health that I wanted it to be. And so it had to be a big rock those first couple weeks of summer for myself. But now I have the routines down. I don't take as much time and energy to think about it. It's part of my daily habits. It's more of a pebble. It's something I have to do, something I budget my time for, but I don't spend as much mental energy on it. And so now I have time for something else.
I love that. I love you just took that analogy one step farther where like our big rocks can become pebbles. You know, a habit establishment is a big rock that requires intentionality, it requires focus, it requires discipline, it requires a lot from you. But then once it's established, that's the great thing about habits is it doesn't require that anymore. And so it's just a right now rock. It's not a forever rock. Welcome to Breakthrough Mode, the podcast where we intentionally get into the driver's seat of our lives, shift out of monotony and mediocrity, and step on the gas towards becoming the person we were always meant to become. Hello, and welcome to episode 297 on the Breakthrough Mode podcast. I am your host, Megan Bauer. Thank you so much for joining me and pushing play on today's episode. Today, I have Ashley Martin here with me, and Ashley is one of my best friends, and she is a professional learning coach for teachers, and we have truly bonded over personal development, becoming better, living intentionally, and really being as best as we can be and making the most of our potential. So this conversation that we are about to have was born months ago, and we are finally having the opportunity to sit down and record this for you. So thank you, Ashley, for being here on the podcast. I totally love you, and I'm so glad you are here doing this with me.
Thank you for inviting me.
So months ago, really, like last December, maybe even, we were having a conversation at Starbucks about teaching intentionally and what that looked like for teachers. And Ashley told me this metaphor that I had heard previously, but it struck in a new way. And I love that we are able to kind of capture this conversation for everyone else and that we can kind of dive into it in a different way and in a different light. Do you mind going over that metaphor for us?
Absolutely. So I don't know where this metaphor originated from. So I don't know who to credit it for the original idea of it. But we use this a lot when we're talking about time management. So I want you to imagine that you have a jar. And on the side of the jar, you have different items. You have big rocks, you have pebbles, and you have sand. And oftentimes we find ourselves trying to fit all of those things into a jar. And those things represent the things that we need to do, things that are important to us, our duties, our responsibilities, our goals, whatever our life gives us. Those are our rocks, our pebbles, and our sand. And oftentimes when we find ourselves busy, we are truly just filling our day full of sand. It's kind of that thought process of, oh my gosh, I'm so busy, but I did nothing and I accomplished nothing today, even though I was busy. And it's kind of an exhausting way to spend your energy. And so as we think about all the things that we need to do, and if we have to fit it all into our jar, a lot of times what happens when you're not intentional is that you kind of just do whatever comes at you. And that's kind of your sand. So you put all your sand in, you're working on and giving your energy and attention to whatever's just coming at you. And then throughout the day, you remember, oh my goodness, I've got to get to this, and maybe it's groceries or maybe it's, oh, I got to go print this assignment for students, whatever job or place you're at in your life. And as you put them in, you kind of try to shove them in and realize it's an okay fit, but it's not great. And then as your day goes on, you remember, oh, I also have this really important thing that's been a huge priority for me, whether it was given to me as a priority or it's a personal goal priority, and you try to fit it into your jar and it just doesn't fit right. And so trying to fit things into your jar in that order, it doesn't fit. Actually, you can't get it all in. And so the analogy continues as take everything back out of your jar. And what has to happen in order for it to all fit into your jar is that you have to actually place your big rocks first. You have to know what your big rocks are. So you put your big rocks in the jar and then they all fit all of a sudden. And then you can put your pebbles in and then you pour your sand in afterwards. And that is where your sand kind of fills up all those gaps. And actually, you can get everything to fit.
Yeah. So I think from that analogy, most people, they don't really have a time problem. We have a priority problem
Mm-hmm.
and really tending to what's most important first, the
Yep.
putting the big rocks in and then letting the pebbles fill in and then the sand
Mm-hmm.
fill in because we all have the same amount of time a day.
Yep.
And some days we use it really well and some days we don't. So then the question becomes how do you know what those big rocks are?
That's a hard one to determine because it's so personal for everyone. But there's this thought process sometimes that happens. I've noticed, especially with myself, that everything needs to be a big rock, and it doesn't. And so, and a lot of times I have a lot of big rocks on my plate and they actually can't all fit in the jar. I can't give time and attention to all the things I want to do, all the projects I want to do at work, all the projects I want to do at home, all the things I want to do with my kids. Those are big rocks in my life. They're huge priorities. And yet I can't do everything that pops into my head that I think is important. And so you have to be able to determine what those big rocks are. And less is more. It really is. And I've noticed in my life that I have to be very intentional with what my big rocks are and sit and evaluate and have time with myself to reflect what do I really need to focus on right now is one of my big rocks. So, from like a teacher standpoint, I relate to that really well. So, I'm going to use some analogies with that because I think others can kind of put themselves in those shoes too. But at the beginning of the school year, there are things that are more priority over others. So, my routines that I get the kids into, teaching rules and procedures, that has to be one of my big rocks. If it isn't, then often the school year doesn't go well because there's no class management there. Nobody knows how to do anything or how to get anywhere. How do we line up for lunch? What does that look like? And so when you're reflecting that, where does that take place? Well, it's got to take place those first 6 weeks of school. So that rock has to be there. And then you think, okay, what else? And you think through your priorities and what really should happen in what order and what really needs to happen now. And so as you're working through that process, you pick your big rocks. And a lot of times I use the rule of three, and I can do three big rocks. And most of the reason is I might think, oh, I can probably fit more into my jar. But sometimes we don't realize that we still have pebbles we have to do, those day-to-day things. I've got to check my email at some point. I have to keep up on household chores. And I also need to, at some point, think about dinner. And I don't really want to, but I've got to make that work at some point. And
Yeah.
then what about all those other things that come at you? You've got friend texts that you don't want to miss, or that
Oh,
or that giant group me that your kids are signed up on a softball team and you need to be able to have time to take whatever's coming at you and all those phone calls you have to weed through, and then I got to make that Amazon return. You have all these other things that come at you and people that will enter into your day, right? And ask things of you and ask for your time and your energy. And that's your sand. And so that's why I try to stick to the rule of three, because much more than that, I don't typically always have the bandwidth. But that's me. And as I've kind of thought through my process and as I've worked through things, I've recognized three is kind of my lucky number.
Yeah, and, like, I think that's a great number too, just because you don't wanna be at capacity. You don't want to fit, 10 big rocks in a jar and then feel like, "Oh my gosh," then you've got these pebbles, and then you have the sand, and then, like, all of the little things will just feel so big and so overwhelming because you're
Hmm.
already at capacity.
Yeah.
So, I think that's a great rule and a great way to not just manage things, but also to be kind to yourself in a way too. Like I've got this formula of like true capacity and it's, all of the things that you've got to do and then like kind of what's left over and then you really only budget out 70% of what's left over for other things
Hmm.
so that you've got some margin so
Yeah,
that you have room to breathe
exactly.
because I mean we're human beings and yes, improve and personally develop, but we also don't need to be like we're not machines. We don't need to be optimized
Yep.
for every single minute of the day. And I think sometimes in personal development, we can forget that we don't not every minute needs to be optimized.
Right. I've also noticed too, as I plan out, I try to do kind of a weekly plan for my big rocks. And some days I give kind of attention to this rock more than this rock, because I've also recognized that I can't always predict how my body is going to feel that day. And you're just like you were talking about, when you push yourself to capacity, that is another type of exhaustion that we just can't maintain. And one of the messages I absolutely love of yours, Megan, is we are meant to have joy in our life. And when you're always at capacity, it is hard to feel joy. And so really knowing what those rocks are and saying, this is time and energy that I'm going to spend on these right now. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the only thing that's in your vision. I have a lot of things, what I say is on deck, right? I have projects that, okay, I know that this is going to be coming up and that this is going to be important for me or for my family or for the teachers I coach. And so I kind of have this idea of what is on deck and things that as I work on these priorities, these three rocks, big rocks in my jar, at some point, I do kind of think out, when do those rocks become more pebbles? When am I in a maintenance phase with a goal? Even like personal exercise, at first, like I had to make that a priority for the summer. I noticed my body was not at the strength and at the health that I wanted it to be. And so it had to be a big rock those first couple weeks of summer for myself. And but now that I have the routines down, I don't take as much time and energy to think about it. It's just part of my habit now. It's part of my daily habits. I now have time. It's more of a pebble. It's something I have to do, something I budget my time for, but I don't spend as much mental energy on it. And so now I have time for something else. So what else do I put in there? Okay, well, now my house needs some attention after a school year of neglecting it. At times, I've recognized that, okay, I can actually work on some projects that I didn't finish throughout the school year that I started on breaks. And so I have noticed too that one of the things I did last summer was one of my big rocks was actually creating a maintenance schedule for me in my home so that throughout the school year I could get my basic needs and things done. And that was a time of rock for me of, okay, what does my day to day look at like so that I can manage my time well and still do those things that I need to do, my chores. And so I needed to create like a system for myself. So at the time, that was a big rock. But as the system got underway, those became pebbles. And now it's just a pebble in my day. I just need to schedule a time to go clean my bathrooms. And I know what that looks like. I know the routine that I go through with it. And it doesn't take mental energy. It just takes that 20 minutes that I need to go do this or that.
Right.
And so, but the big things are, replacing baseboards or, upgrading, different things in your home. So that is just kind of some examples of personal rocks that I have.
Yeah.
And yeah, but I have others on deck, right? So I've got some stuff for school, but school's not in session. So they're on deck.
Yeah.
And I know come August, it's time to start thinking about when to move them to actually be a rock in my jar.
Yeah, I love that. I love you just took that analogy a one step farther where like our big rocks can become pebbles. A habit establishment is a big rock that requires intentionality, it requires focus, it requires discipline, it requires a lot from you. But then once it's established, that's the great thing about habits is it doesn't require that anymore. It just requires you to go along with it and, engage in it. And that there are times for every rocks. Like as you were speaking, I know you used the term on deck, but I kind of in my head, I saw like a shelf of like all these geodes and stuff like that. Of course, they're sparkly, right? But it was like,
Course.
okay, well, that's this, right now I'm in this geode of getting my house ready to sell is in my jar. And soon it's not going to be like my house will be ready. And then that won't be a rock in my jar anymore. And so it's just a right now rock. It's not a forever rock. I kind of feel like maybe we could get the impression or the feeling that these are forever priorities, but they can be switched out. And I think they can probably be switched out based on the day, don't you think?
Absolutely. Yeah. I definitely think there's a time and a season for everything. And sometimes those seasons are a literal season, or sometimes it's an age. I'm thinking of, I have a brand new 4-year-old. He just turned 4 this week. And so we're in a very different stage than we were at the 1-year-old stage. So there's different seasons, and sometimes it's a day-to-day thing. Today, my rock needs to be focused on this. And
Yeah.
I think we know what our rocks are when we take time to counsel with ourselves. I call them scheduling sessions, and I have a weekly scheduling session. And then I do actually part of my morning routine is I do a quick little brief and I time myself. It's, we're talking less than 10 minutes. I have a 10-minute timer and I set it and I just review my plan for the week. Am I on track? Is is this plan that I made last Saturday for myself on Wednesday, right? Is it still applicable? Did things change? Do I need to adjust? Did something else, a different big rock fill it up? And, I definitely have to look at, okay, if this is calling my attention, but I've already planned to give my attention to this rock, which one am I actually going to give it to? And when it comes to my children, most of the time they're gonna take the cake and I'm gonna have to figure out what to do with this other rock. And sometimes it's, you know, actually I know that this is really important to them and this is really important to me too. And so I'm actually gonna intentionally put that rock aside or sometimes say no. And it's okay. And that was really hard for me to learn
Yeah.
is but knowing that my big rock was this showed me that this right now, this responsibility or maybe this volunteer opportunity is not something that I'm going to give my energy to. It helps me make more informed decisions.
Intentional decisions.
Yeah. And I'm
Yeah.
not just saying no because I don't want to, or I'm not saying no out of guilt because I feel like, or I saying yes, I guess, out of guilt. Um, I actually have a very confident reason behind an intentional reason behind my yes or my no.
All right. And the truth is that every yes is a no somewhere else. And so,
Absolutely.
when you look at not just what you're saying yes to, but what you're also saying no to, that puts things into a little bit more perspective. you know?
Mhm.
And sometimes we do have space and time and energy and capacity for the volunteer thing, and sometimes we don't.
Exactly.
Something else's opportunity.
Right. And part of my scheduling too is to schedule out times for myself. I really like this idea of every big rock requires some deep work. And if we're not scheduling time for ourselves with those big rocks, sand will overtake it almost every single time.
Yeah.
And it's because things are just coming at you and you
Yeah.
have to deal with them sometimes. But if you can say, oh, I'm going to pause right there. To give an example, I'm walking through the halls at school and I'm on my way to do a lesson for a first grade teacher in phonics. And that is one of my big rocks is to support this brand new teacher in their instruction and make sure that we get some systems and quality instruction down for students. Now, if I'm walking down the hall and my principal walks past and say, "Hey, I actually need you to go and fill out this form for me. I need it done by whatever time." Well, I already know that's not a rock. That's not even a pebble. That's sand. Or someone's asking, "Hey, could you check on this for me?" Or as I'm walking down the hall, "Hey, could you grab me this? Could you make a copy?" It's actually so much kinder to myself and to that person. I can at this point, after I take care of this big rock and this priority, after I go teach this lesson, I can be available for you. And clear as kind when they know that you're going to put your big rocks first, whether it's your family, your colleagues, your friends, and then you have time outside of that for those things that just kind of get dropped in your lap last minute, then guess what? Everyone feels better about, your answers.
Yeah. I love that phrase you have, clear as kind.
Yeah.
You've said that so many times throughout our friendship, and that's true. Like when you just remove any of the ambiguity and, you're very clear in what you're doing right now, what your priorities are, then everybody knows what to expect.
Yep.
And we like that. As humans, we like to know what to expect.
Exactly.
I feel like energy is a great way to tell us if we're on track or not. So, in that light, when you spend your day with your having put your big rocks in first and then your pebbles and then taking care of the sand, what do you feel like at the end of the day?
I still spent a lot of energy, I'm not going to lie. And I feel very good about where my time and energy went because I was intentional with it. And instead of feeling like I'm drowning in sand, I was able to take care of the things that were most important to me, to forward my goals, to forward the work that's important to me in my life. And then I was able to fill in the gaps. And some days I don't have room for a lot of sand. And some days I have to say no to that sand at some point. That sand isn't going to fit anywhere else. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with, if I didn't go through and check social media because that's just sand. Let's be honest.
Well, and
We want to say it's not, but it is.
and real quick, like we like sand on our terms. Like we'd love to go to the beach and like
Yeah.
build sand castles and stuff like that. But you don't want to be walking down the hall and have sand in your shoe. Like
Nope.
you want sand on your terms.
Exactly. I
You,
like that. I do like that. I'm gonna use that.
you
Stand
don't
on your
want to just like have it in places you do not want it.
exactly right. And,
Yeah.
there's some things that, at the end of the day, I'm like, oh, I've got to work through this, even though, I'm kind of spent. I think it's given me this mindset of I can plan it as well. And so if I'm at the end of the day and I've realized, okay, I do have to do the dishes because I don't want stinky dishes in the morning. And I really got to organize that closet. I give myself permission to say, no, I'm going to organize that on my terms on a different day. It doesn't have to fill up my cup today. And that will still get done. Whereas in the past, when I've just filled up my day with sand and then try to fit my big rocks at the end of the day, there was no time ever for that closet. That closet would go undone for years
Yeah.
because I wasn't able to give myself those boundaries of time management, when to actually put that on my plate. And it's a pebble. It's something that needs to get done, and yet I can still do it and feel good about it. I don't have to push myself to over capacity in order to get it done.
Right. It's honestly, in the long run, it's not worth your exhaustion and it's not worth
Mhm.
you pushing yourself over the edge for it's just knowing that, like acknowledging that. When we say it out loud, you're like, well, of course a closet isn't worth all of that. But in the moment, sometimes it feels critical and you just
Yep.
you gotta be like, okay, the closet's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Like it's not a big rock. It's a pebble and putting it in perspective.
Mhm.
Yeah. So on the other side, when you do spend your day, you said drowning in sand. This is the part where you kind of mentioned in the very beginning of like you're busy all day and you feel like you got nothing done.
Yeah.
I when I feel this way, I feel like I've just spent my energy in all the wrong place. Actually spend my energy on what was valuable to me. And that's a day kind of spent in reaction,
Yeah, absolutely.
and it's just whatever's coming towards us, that's what we're dealing with. So this is definitely the topic here is definitely what is most important, what matters most, and then choosing in alignment with that. Because you can know what your big rocks are and then still choose the sand.
Absolutely. And some days we do. And that's why it's important to give yourself some grace, forgive, and the next day check in with yourself and say, okay, yeah, in retrospect, I spent too much time on sand. I made choices to sand. And now, today, I know where those pitfalls are so I can avoid that. When that choice comes, I'm going to pause, do this first, and then do that and make an intentional decision.
Right.
I still have days of sand.
We all do. We all
Right.
do. That's like part of the human path, like we're going to do great some days and we're going to do not so great some days. But I love what you just said there. That's one of the big reasons that I am such a big fan of morning rituals because it's a restart to the day. Yesterday was whatever yesterday was. And today we get to make new choices. We get to be more intentional and we get to take the time to figure out what matters most for today. What are those big rocks? What are we going to pull off the shelf and put in our jar first before all the little things start crowding in? I think that really starts in the morning.
Yeah, because if you don't give yourself the mental space to think through those things, you're spent in reaction the rest of the day.
Yeah. Well, that was so fun. Thank you, Ashley, for joining me on this conversation. I love
Yes.
this. I love how we took this typically time management topic and turned it to really focusing on and acting in alignment with what matters most because I don't really feel like it's about managing time. It's really about knowing the most important things and then putting those first.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what we have for you today. Until next time, I totally love you. Bye for now.